travel industry is one of the industry where technology always catches up very late, right? And I had the fortunate thing about working with big airlines, AirAsia, you know, we have Wizz Air. I've worked with all of them. Funny enough, they are considered as leaders in this particular space, but when you look at the technology, it's far away from where the technology should be, right? So travel industry's got a massive extra bandwidth where it can actually bring in more technology, right? And there are several aspects you can increase and improve the customer services where you can make money and things like that. So I'm going to talk about a very small element of the travel industry where we can bring in artificial intelligence. I'm not going to talk about theory. I'm not going to talk about, you know, complex concepts. I'm going to talk about something very simple which you can take away today and then try and go and apply it, right? Okay, without further ado, I'm going to go to the next slide. So what is interesting for me is when I talk to a lot of my customers and, you know, in shows like this, people come to me and ask me, what is artificial intelligence, right? People say, oh, what is machine learning? You know, what is pattern recognition? What is data science? It's a lot of jargon, basically, right? What it actually means is very simple. When you do machine learning, you find out patterns, right? What patterns mean is, okay, there are a set of people who are doing certain things. That is a pattern, right? For example, you can see people who are traveling from Berlin to London, and they're traveling always at 8 o'clock in the morning. That is a pattern, right? So using machine learning, you can find that out. Nothing more. It doesn't solve your problem. It just tells you there is a pattern in your data set. That's it, right? The second thing is data sciences. Again, a lot of people saying, I'm going to invest in data science. Why do you want to invest in it? I don't know. It sounds cool. Right? That's what most of the people say. So when you look at data sciences, all it does is it gives you insight. It says, hey, you know, you're making, let's say, 100 euros per passenger per operation, right? That's all it does. It doesn't solve your problem. Still, it doesn't solve your problem. But what artificial intelligence means is actual problem solving, right? The interesting part about artificial intelligence is you need to know what the problem is, right? That is where the issue is all about. Because I go and speak to majority of the CMOs and ask them the question, where is your problem? I can help you with artificial intelligence, but where is your problem? They're like, we're not really sure. It's interesting, isn't it? If you don't know the problem, you can't solve it. So just by buying artificial intelligent technology, you're not going to solve your problem. First of all, you need to understand your problem. And that on its own is a big problem in our travel industry, right? Everybody says, oh, I'm just going to buy this, I'm just going to buy that, I'm going to buy these technologies, and suddenly all the problems are gone. Nah, you've just increased your problems because you have certain technologies out there which you're never going to use ever in your lifetime, right? And that is a major issue in our travel industry. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down a little bit more. Right? I'm going to talk about marketer's challenge. So when we talk about marketer's challenge, we have three major things. We have data, right? I'm pretty certain, collectively put together all the marketers who are here, they have so much of data, they don't even know that it actually exists within their database. There's tons of it. Nobody knows what to do with it, right? The second thing is they've got tons of content which they don't use at all whatsoever. It's there. It's there in their, either on the website, in the brochures, everywhere. They just don't use it, right? The last thing is engagement, right? When I talk about engagement, it's about communicating with the customer. So, you know, I won't ask the question awkwardly, but the number of times I've met marketers who are saying, I'm going to send a newsletter on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday. Or I'm going to send a newsletter once a month. How is that an engagement? Right? The number of times I've met marketers who come up to me and said, yes, we do one-to-one personalization. A lot of times everybody says that. But truly, are you doing one-to-one personalization? I'm not going to ask a question, so you don't have to put your hands up, right? But the reality is not many people actually do it. And I'll tell you the reason why, right? For you to actually really get to the bottom of something, you need to understand the individual, the singular individual in your database. Let's say you have a customer, or let's talk about your marketing presence.
Visitors, please be aware of airports.
Yep.
Estimados expositores, estimados visitantes.
That's fantastic. She's talking over me. Right.
Sehr geehrte Aussteller, sehr geehrte Besucher. Wir bitten Sie, auf Ihre Wertegegenstände zu achten.
That's brilliant, thank you. Now, so you got to understand your customer at the most minute level, right? So let's say you have like million customers in a database. That means you need to understand every single individual at the most molecular level, right? Is it possible? Yeah. But is it scalable? Probably not, right? That's where it boils down to, right? How many of you do segmentation? Segmentation? Anybody does segmentation? Great. Great, which is great, right? But here's the thing. When you start thinking about one-to-one communication, what you have to think about is treating your content like a data set. Right? That's the most important thing. If you don't treat your content like a data set, it's never going to work. And that's where your issue is going to start. The second issue I'm going to talk about is a very interesting one. I'm just trying to position this, right? The second thing you need to think about is merging the data sets, as in treating your content as a single piece of data set, right? I know it's getting a little bit complex, but I'll simplify it in a minute, right? What you have to think about is integrating all these things vertically, right? I'm actually showing you a very fancy diagram, but it'll all make sense when I come to the end, right? But for the moment, go with the flow, stay with me. I know it's lunchtime, but still stay with me, right? So where I'm trying to get to is we have to think about, oh, actually, it's interesting. We have to think about engagement also as a data set, okay? And now I've told you three things. You need to think about your content as data, right? You need to think about your customers as a data, and you also have to think about your engagements as data, right? I'm going to say something very controversial at the moment. The very fact you're doing segmentation, that means you're not doing one-to-one communication. The very fact you're doing segmentation, you've put everybody in buckets already, which means you're not individualizing their experience, which on its own is a big flaw, right? Would you agree? Yes, no? Yes, yeah? So that's basically the problem, right? The moment you start thinking about segmentation, you already have an issue, right? So let's say you're putting together 10 segments and you have 1 million customers in a database, and let's say you have 10 pieces of content, and if you multiply what I just said, you're already looking at the permutations and combinations which you can't even comprehend. That's a big number, and you can't really individualize it at all whatsoever, right? And that's when you can start using artificial intelligence. I'm going to explain how, right? So if you think about one of the examples we try to do is a lot of customers come to me and say, hey, when is the best time to send anything at all to a customer, right? Is it Monday morning, 9 o'clock? I know a lot of analysts, I work with a lot of analysts, and I always have debates with the big analysts in the press media. They said, they release papers saying Wednesday, 9 o'clock is the best time to send. Suddenly another analyst on a Friday, he'll release a paper saying Friday, 3 p.m. is the best time to send, whether you want to send an email or a push message or whatever it is, right? It's like, who made them the expert? What makes them think that they know best, right? What makes them think that they know better about you as a consumer? Have you ever thought that you are one of the consumers, right? Nobody can define when you're going to interact with a piece of content. And that's very important, and that is very individualized, right? then if you think about 1 million people in your database, that means you have 1 million variations of somebody interacting with you at different points in time. For you to calculate a campaign for those 1 million individuals is nigh on impossible. However, if you give the jobs to the algorithms and say, hey, try and find out at an individual basis where the customers are at and when they are most likely to interact and where they have been interacting in the past, now suddenly your life has become easier, right? And then you can also make sure that the consumers, your end customers, are getting the content at the right time, right? Now that is called send time optimization. And that's what we do. Our business is to understand where the customers are interacting and communicate with them at the right time, right? In marketing, there's always a big thing. I mean, I've been in the industry for the past 15 years. 15 years ago, we all said as marketers, we want to send the right channel, the right time, the right content, the right everything, right? The reality is we never did it because we just couldn't do it, right? And that's where the artificial intelligence is coming along. So if you think about whatever I said so far, thinking about data as your content as your data set, your engagement as a data set, and suddenly if you have an algorithm which contacts your consumers individually and takes everything together, sends it to them, it's easy, right? But it all sounds a bit complex and rocket science and all the rest of it. So here's a prediction. For the next 5 years, artificial intelligence will come into marketing, and it's going to change fundamentally how we do marketing because of the fact there is a problem we need to solve. And this is one of the problems we solved for our customers because they came to us and they said, hey, solve this small problem for us. So what we did, we solved the problem, and then we put a simple button which says, use send time optimization. That's it. That's all we did. Right? So the marketers don't have to think about deploying campaigns on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday morning, Tuesday mornings, Wednesday evenings. They don't have to think about it. The machines and the algorithms individually can figure out where your consumers are at, what to send to them, and how to send it to them, and when to send it to them, right? With just a single button. And that's all you have to do. And that's where artificial intelligence is going to come in. It's going to make your fundamental life easy. And if it doesn't make it easy, don't use artificial intelligence, because that's not the purpose of artificial intelligence. AI is all about making your donkey work being easy. And that's all about, right? I'm going to also go through another one. Like I said, we've experimented with this. We've got one-click activation, as we call it, because I fundamentally believe, if AI is not simple, it will never be adopted. Currently in the market, everybody makes it complex, right? If you have to buy AI technology, it's expensive, right? And actually, after you've bought it and spent money for 2 years, you realize that it hasn't solved any problems. Remember my first statements, right? If it doesn't solve your problem, don't use AI. And I've shown you a very small example of how it solves, but it's a very important problem it actually solves, right? The next one we do is a very interesting one. And we've used this in retail a lot, and now we're reapplying this in travel, right? We have a couple of algorithms which actually is interesting, right? So dynamic pricing has been in the travel industry for a while. Everybody loves dynamic pricing. Some have a bit of bad view about dynamic pricing, but some of them love it, right? But when you get to the bottom of dynamic pricing, right, the end consumer doesn't really get any benefit out of it. It's usually the brands who benefit out of this, out of the dynamic pricing. So it's always one-sided, right? So it's always one-sided, because it's the person who's setting the margin and where they want the algorithm to be. The consumer always ends up paying the cost base or above, right? That's reality. But there is always a happy medium we can actually come to, where we can put in incentives for consumers to buy into it, which is what happens in retail, right? Currently retail, we have a lot of consumers use AI to put the right incentives. One of the biggest example I can give you is Black Fridays, right? Black Fridays, you can actually do different incentive programs for different consumers to buy things. And that's what it's all about. So basically, what we are trying to do is to try and predict what each and every customer will buy when you put a certain amount of offer in front of them, right? It could be based on ancillaries you're trying to sell, it could be based on packages you're trying to sell, or it could be just the booking you're trying to put in front of them, right? We try and predict based on each and every consumer, taking into account your dynamic pricing as well, right? And that's how these algorithms work. Again, this has to be individualized, and it has to be done in real time. If there is a human sitting behind and trying to calculate all of these things and try and send it to them, it is not going to work. It's not going to work at all whatsoever, right? That's where you need artificial intelligence solving problems in real time and communicating with your customers, right? So gone are the days when you can send a blanket email saying, okay, I'm going to do 10% discount for every single customer in my database, right? Usually doesn't work. Then the last thing is journeys. You know, if you've been in the marketing automation field and if you're using a lot of marketing automation platforms, this is fantastic, right? Everybody does journeys, like big journeys with, I'm going to send an email, wait for 5 days, send an SMS, wait for 2 days, da-da-da-da. They all put together a nice little journey. What is interesting about this is your view of the consumer. You think that if I do this, the consumer is going to react. Maybe 5% of your consumers will follow rules like this. But in reality, that's not the case, right? Because consumers have a different workflows. They think differently. And that's where you need artificial intelligence, where this is replaced by automated nodes or artificial intelligence nodes, which says, I want to individually do things for individual consumers, right? This is the future, if you think about it, right? I'm not going to wait for 5 days. I'm not going to send an email or an SMS or a push message or a web message. That has to be individualized for a consumer. And that's where, you know, artificial intelligence comes in, because it can pick and choose every single consumer, predict what they need, when they would need it, how they would need it, and present it back to them, right? So as you can already see, you know, the change which is going to happen in the travel industry, right? I had the fortunate thing of working with AirAsia, also with Wizz Air and a couple of other guys. They are transforming the way they're actually positioning ancillaries at the moment, right? I don't know whether you know about this, like now there's a big move in unbundling ancillaries. You know, previously we in the travel industry, it used to be bundles of ancillaries. You bundle up ancillaries and just sell it to your customer, right? But now everybody's unbundling it simply because of the fact there is a higher chance of conversion and customers can buy a lot more ancillaries if you position to them correctly, right? Also considering the fact you can put in the right incentive, you can give them the right offer at the right time, right? And that's making a massive impact. And the revenue and the bottom line is also increasing, okay? So I'm conscious of time as well. One thing about this is a lot of customers come to me and say, you know what you just said there is complex. It's too much for me. I'm still in email mode. I'm still in SMS mode. I just want to bulk campaigns. This artificial intelligence is way too much for me. I just can't take it. Just stop it, right? The number of times customers come and say, this is not going to work for my organization. That's the first thing they say. It's not because they don't want it. It's the fear of the unknown, right? They're always unsure where to start. And this has been a major problem for adoption. So what we did, we know there's a problem. We want to fix it. And the way we fix it is by giving what I call as progressive control to the customer, right? When I say progressive control, I'm talking about something like this. So what we do is we allow the customers to put together a controlled algorithm. What a controlled algorithm means is you can actually choose how much of your database you want artificial intelligence to take control of and work with your consumers so that you can still continue with your normal marketing automation practices, but then you can also have the other part which can be controlled by the machines, right? But the most important thing is, I'm going to go back to the first thing I said. It is going to solve a certain problem, and that's what you want. And what it really solves is this, right? You can pick and choose your goals, where you can think about your revenue versus profit, right? And normally, from a marketing point of view, we never think about it. We always think about, hey, I just want to send an email. If I get a click-through and somebody buys it, yeah, great. But what if we could do the reverse? What if we can start from the end, where we can say, hey, I'm actually looking at conversion rates at the moment. I don't mind I get a lot of profit. I'm okay with a little bit of profit, but I want a lot of revenue and I want a lot of conversion. That is possible. You know why? Because the machines are constantly finding out what's happening with your revenue as well, and it knows what's there in your database and what can be positioned to your end consumers, and how it can put together offers. Suddenly, marketing is not just like an outbound campaign or SEO campaign anymore. It becomes much more than that, right? And this is like an inspiration I personally got when I started working with the CMOs, because CMOs want to have a board seat where they're talking about revenue and they're controlling revenue, right? And that's where it all starts. And we already have customers who do this, because they say, hey, I want to take 50% of my database, and I want to adjust my revenue settings. I want to look at my conversion settings, and then I'm going to hand it over to the machines to do it. And the machines do it themselves, right? Tell you what, they do a much better job than us as marketers trying to do campaigns on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? It's a fact. Because it proves, we can see the results, that it works, right? And we have customers who started at 10%, who've been very skeptical about it. It's like, oh, it's not going to work for us. And then suddenly they moved up to 90%, and we have customers who have 100% control over databases, which is done by completely artificial intelligent algorithms, right? The future is not far. The future is already here, right? The role of marketing is changing. The role of marketing in travel is changing, right? Very soon, it's going to be completely different, right? On that note, just to let you know, we're just around the corner there. If you have any questions, come and let us know. And I'm just going to do a quick recap, right? The recap is single customer view of your database is very important, but that is very, very relevant to the problem you're solving. Think about the problem you're solving. That's the most important thing. Treat the content as a data set. Don't think about content as a piece of writing you've just done, but it's a piece of content. That's the most important thing, and it's a very good data set. Try and think about engagements as a data set as well, right? And try and merge all of that together. Bring in AI when you have identified a problem where you cannot do something at a manual scale. That's when you bring in AI. You just don't bring in AI to do anything and everything. You need to identify a problem and then bring in AI algorithms to solve that problem for you, which you cannot do manually. Last but not the least, this is what we don't do. This is what we never do in marketing, right? Optimize. It's funny, I've worked with so many heads of marketings and the CMOs and all the rest of it. What I find very interesting is they've done a project, they've already moved on to the next. They never thought what's actually gone wrong with the previous one. They always want to do something new. They always look for the new shiny toy. And sometimes when I talk about AI, they always come to me and say, I want to buy that. Yes, but why? Think about it from an optimization perspective. Always have a stable ground. So I always tell everyone the simple 3 things. Test, test, test. Optimized, optimize, and optimize. Right? On that final note, all I want to say is AI is not scary. It's here. Right? We all have to embrace it. And the good news is it's just going to help us get it better. And it's going to help us serve the consumers better. And that's what the travel industry is all about. Okay? So one more last thing. You can find me on LinkedIn, which is the easiest place because I don't do business cards anymore. I try to be environment friendly. Please find me on LinkedIn. We're just around the corner there. We have a booth there, so come and speak to us if you need anything. But apart from that, you guys have been very nice. It's lunchtime, so thank you for your time. Thanks.